30 years on the rise. Journal of HTM shines in tourism and events, sharing knowledge worldwide. 30 years on the rise. Journal of HTM shines in tourism and events, sharing knowledge worldwide. 7.6 impact score, but we strive to do more. In hospitality's growth, we're opening new doors. To the field we commit, building insights that fit. For researchers to grow, we lead and we transmit. To the field we commit, building insights that fit. For researchers to grow, we lead and we transmit. To the field we commit, building insights that fit. For researchers to grow, we lead and we transmit. 30 years on the rise. Journal of HTM shines in tourism and events, sharing knowledge worldwide. 30 years on the rise. Journal of HTM shines in tourism and events, sharing knowledge worldwide.
Beautiful. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our sessions. This is Professor Mariana Sigala, Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Management. I'm really thrilled to chair this webinar, which is part of the online research festival of the Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Management, celebrating the 30-year anniversary. I wouldn't like to consume a lot of time discussing about the journal. I hope you enjoyed our introduction. I was talking about AI just before when I was coordinating with my webinar members, and I was saying AI is doing a lot of impact in terms of research. So as you saw here, that PowerPoint presentation was developed by AI. The lyrics were developed by AI. The music was developed by AI. Not the facts of the journal, but everything was there. But thanks everyone for your support. I really appreciate, because without everyone's help, we wouldn't have been here. So let me introduce you to our members today for our interesting webinar. Our topic is destination marketing and management, what research has to offer as a solution, hopefully. I'm chairing the session, and I'm privileged to have a long lineup of speakers and members today, mixing academia and industry. Professor Alan Fayal from University of Central Florida. Welcome, Alan.
Thanks,
Professor
Mariana.
Brian Garrond from UK, Swansea University. Thank you, Brian, as well. Professor Yucheng Wang from University of Central Florida as well. Dr. Isaac Mirazi, Senior Director of Marketing, Visit Canberra in Australia. Peter Jordan, Destination Management Consultant of a worldwide famous company on destination marketing and management called Toposophy. Carolina Mendoca from Azores DMO in Portugal. And last but not least, Dimitrios Kalaitsidakis, Operations Director from the hotel chain Greek Hotel and Resorts in Greece. Thank you everyone again for committing the time and sharing your knowledge with us. I will give the floor first to our three prestigious, worldwide known for their contribution to knowledge in terms of destination marketing and management, to share with us their reflections and ideas in terms of how destination marketing and management has evolved and what we should be expecting in the future. I will open the floor after you finish, guys, to the audience for some very quick questions, and then I will open the panel for discussions and contributions for the rest of the members. So thank you again for doing it, and looking forward to hear you.
Thank you, Mariana. So if you just bear with me, I'm just going to hopefully connect. Can you see our screen?
Yes.
We are in business, yeah. Lovely. And does it move? Even better. Okay, let me just say welcome. Thank you very much indeed, Mariana, and congratulations with the journal. I think, did you say 2,000 plus submissions? Crazy, crazy, crazy. So I commend you for your efforts and your patience dealing with that many submissions. Why is it the three of us? The three of us were involved with the beginning of the Journal of Destination Marketing Management about 10 or 12 years ago. So I think it's fair to say that the three of us have had a deep passion about destination and touristic places for a long, long time. And very, very happy to be here this evening from Florida. This is my family. I show this picture frequently because I think sometimes we get so bogged down with the technicalities or the academic work that we actually forget that people enjoy being tourists. People love to travel. They will continue to travel. And no matter what the problems in the world, people just keep on traveling, which is part of our challenge. And this is Bryce Canyon in Utah, about sort of 5:30 in the morning. And it seems to be no matter what challenge is thrown at people, no matter what challenges are thrown at countries or whatever, people still seem to wish to travel. So it's something that somehow we have to accept and just manage better. And it really goes back to the 1950s, as we're all aware. And I think the statement in the second paragraph there, it's nothing new. I think the challenge of tourism has been around for a long time. I think the extent to which destinations understand the impact, the reach and vulnerability of tourism, these are not new issues, but it's constant re-education. And I think a theme that will probably come up later, Mariana, is politicians change all the time, but many politicians who are hugely instrumental in tourism development, the education is continuous because they're constantly changing. And I think what we're all aware of, the speed of change, it seems to get quicker and quicker. And the extent to which the political establishment and the supporting infrastructure can actually keep pace with the industry and keep pace with the trends that is our challenge. It's the speed of the world, it's the speed with which happens, and the extent to which the industry can actually respond. It's quite funny. I like showing this slide because my first international trip was in 1974 to Nidrona in Spain. Little did I know as an 8-year-old that really was around that time that Claire Gunn had just published his book, and the whole sort of literature of sort of modern mass tourism was coming to the fore. So I've sort of lived the experience, I guess, and just going through the different themes. I know every time we look at destination studies, you trawl back into the history and, well, you know, how has the discipline developed? And it's really come from, I guess, a primarily geographic focus to environmental impacts, to policy, to economics, etc. And I think one thing that we may come on to a little bit later, if you look at a lot of the authors here over the years, they're primarily from the English-speaking world, which I guess things are slightly different now, which is a good thing. but looking at these early studies from the 70s through the 80s, 90s, etc., there's many names there, be they British, Canadian, Australian, American, etc. So it's very, if you look at some of the journals now, it's very, very different, but certainly the origins of the discipline very much from the English speaking world. If you look over the past 10 years, and it's the cue, I think, for why we're invited today, is that there really has been a trend of sort of synthesis papers, bibliometric studies. As you look down here, the team from St. Gallen in Switzerland are into consensual decision making. There's been a lot of reflective works over the past decade looking at many subjects, but particularly destinations. And just looking through this quickly, if you look at the thematic outcomes, when we came together to write the paper that we submitted to your journal, Mariana, it's really looking at the themes and how have those themes come about? How have they sort of evolved, perhaps, and where do they really take us in the future? And just before I pass to Yu Cheng and Brian, clearly our challenge was, well, how do you narrow that down into sort of 5 key areas? And what we came up with are these 5, and to varying degrees, they're relevant in all destinations. There's some geographic variation, but I'll pass over to my colleague Yu Cheng now, who's about 2 miles down the road from where I'm sitting, to run through some of these key trends. Thanks, Raymond.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you again, Mariana, for inviting us. Congratulations for the journal. Before you realize it, it's already 30 years, right? What a milestone in terms of the submission number, in terms of the impact factor, is going up year by year, right? So that means that I don't know how many nights you have really comfortable sleeps without thinking about the journal, right? It's a major commitment, really from an editor's perspective, right? So this is obviously a very big topic. Anything related to destination marketing and management, it's a big topic. We feel sometimes like this is a big concept where you can input whatever number of related topics possible, right? So when we were given this task, we of course thought about it, and then we had some internal discussions between 3 of us, right? And then we generated a list which we believe is not only important for now, but hopefully will be important in the foreseeable future, right? So this was initiated by 3 of us through internal discussions in terms of what are some of the biggest trends, and also challenges coming up in the domain of destination marketing and management. And then we also reach out to 11 or 12 experts worldwide in this area. These are typically very well-established scholars and researchers focusing on this domain of destination marketing and management. So we actually solicited their inputs in terms of their viewpoints combined with ours, right? Focusing on these the 5 areas. So these are as Alan mentioned, these are the 5 areas we came up with: destination governance, destination competitiveness, and sustainability, destination resilience and crisis management, and of course, we cannot miss the technology and the kind of disruption created by different technology platforms. And last but not least, the tourism experience and emerging markets. And we really had some serious discussions. And one part of discussion I remembered was that, well, each of these concepts can be an independent paper because you can say so much under each of the topics, right? But I will just go over very briefly in terms of what they mean and then what our thinking process are when we focus on these the issues. The first one is destination governance, okay? And we are looking at really from the perspective of DMO. I know that Isaac is sitting here and then you're representing the DMO kind of, business, right? And more exactly what are the roles and responsibilities of the DMO, which is actually it's a very, very important issue because, with the right clear roadmap, with the right type of understanding in terms of responsibilities and roles, right? You can be equipped with certain capacities to do certain things, right? But unfortunately, in different countries or even in different destinations, the mandate for the DMO as well as expectations from the DMO are quite different. Okay, so for example, in the U.S., here we are operating in, right? I would say probably 50-50. 50% of the DMOs are kind of government agencies or pseudo government agencies, right? And which means that, partially their funding is supported by the government, right? So the other 50% are basically independent companies, all right? So they are kind of hired or contracted by the government to conduct destination marketing and management related issues, all right? So if you look at our local area, Orlando, which is represented by Visit Orlando, which is the local DMO, right? So it's a kind of a PPP type of arrangement, right? So we get 50% of the budget from the government, right? But we also get the other 50% of the budget from membership fees and some other entrepreneurial activities. I think we have a total budget right now, probably around $120 million a year. But every year or every 2 or 3 years, this has to be brought to the commissioner, right, for a discussion, and every time it's a little bit scary, which generates a lot of kind of, debates among the different interest groups, because, many of the people, including some of the stakeholders or politicians in the U.S., don't believe that, DMO has a relevance, whether you do marketing or promotion, if the visitors, they want to come, they will come anyway, without you being involved or not, right? So, but if you look at other destinations, European destinations, Asian destinations, for example, China, Thailand, and South Korea, I'm not sure about the structure in Australia. DMO is always part of the government, okay? And with that mandate, of course, they have a lot of more power in terms of what they can do, right? So based on that trajectory, DMO has been really evolving from, in the US, the first DMO, we don't call it DMO, we call it the Convention Bureau, right? So that was set up, I think, in 1895 or 97, in the 1800s. That was a few years before I was born. So whatever happened at that time, I was not responsible for that, right? Because I was not there. So the focus at that time was really only on convention businesses, right? So later on, we integrate the keyword visitor. So the name has been changed into Convention and Visitors Bureau, right? So including both the convention businesses and visitor businesses. But the main mandate at that time was really to promote the convention businesses and visitor businesses, right? And then later on, we evolved into destination marketing organization. So marketing is playing a more important role with the understanding that, of course, in order to do good marketing, we have to understand better of the consumers' demands and preferences, right? So the consumers, so the visitors are, getting into the play, right? And if you look at, for example, the last, 10 to 15 years, right? DMOs are more and more evolved into the community brand manager kind of the role and a leadership role, right? But as I mentioned, because of the structure difference, right? The mandate difference, their roles and responsibilities can be very much different, right? So this puts a lot of challenge for the scholars and researchers who are doing research in this area, right? Because without understanding the nuanced, contextualized circumstances in which they operate, right? We cannot just come up with a model, one model fits all type of thinking process, right? So obviously this is a very elusive topic, and there's a lot of research generated in this area, right? The second one is destination competitiveness and sustainability. Again, a lot of research output has been generated in this area. But I think, one of the traps we tend to fall into is that, whenever we think about competitiveness, we only think about it from a business perspective, right? Whenever we think about sustainability, we tend to only think about environmental sustainability, okay? But the concept of competitiveness and sustainability can be much more wider than that. And, how about social aspect, cultural aspect, and including economic impact aspect and environmental aspect, right? But I think, most of the research in this area are focusing on either economic, perspective or, environmental perspective, at the cost of neglecting, some of the other important aspects. And, the third aspect is really the destination resilience and crisis management. We just gone through this once in a 100-time event, right? Which is called COVID-19. So basically, this event brought the tourism industry to a complete halt, right? And before the seminar, we still talking about whether Australia has really recovered from the COVID 100%. US, we are still recovering. Domestically, I think we have recovered, but in terms of international travel, we are still not there yet. Okay, so it's a long way to go. So to a certain extent, the ability or the capacity for destination resilience and a crisis management becomes a brand. Okay, so if the visitors understand that certain destinations or communities are really doing a good job or can do a good job, in terms of dealing with crisis and coping with crisis, right? That becomes, by itself, that becomes more attractive for the visitors to visit the destination. Again, I just want to cite some local examples. Of course, Florida is a major tourism powerhouse. Central Florida, even more so, right? 75 visitors a year before the COVID, and we are reaching that level right now, okay? And because of the COVID, of course, everything has to be stopped. But I have to say that, Florida was one of the earliest states in the US to open it up and then to bring the tourism back to our life. So personally, I still remember that, March the 10th, I just came back from a trip from Mexico. And then March the 12th, okay, the university announced closure, closed up, no transportation whatsoever. So if I came back 2 days later, right, and then I would be stranded in Mexico, and maybe I would be able to, learn some Spanish over there, But luckily, I came back. And then 2 months later, the governor and the mayor of Orlando set up a task force, which is called the Bring Back Tourism Task Force, right? So I was appointed as one of the co-chairs of the task force. We had so many meetings, very, very intense schedules for 8 weeks, right? So we basically meet every day to talk about the strategies of bringing the tourism businesses back. So every business, including big businesses like Disney, Universal, and small businesses, they have to come up with their proposal and a plan in terms of what they will do to make sure that when the visitors are back, it is they are safe, right? So we had to provide recommendations, and then finally the mayor and the governor actually approved, whether somebody can open their businesses, right? So this is really a kind of one example of how a particular destination can really respond to an unfortunate situation in a very, very positive way, right? And bring back businesses so that it can benefit everybody, right? Technology innovation disruption, obviously, that is playing a more and more role in our daily life, including travel-related activities, both from the consumer's perspective and also from the supplier perspective, right? So when you think about the impact of artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, and big data, right? And then this really provides a completely different set of tools for both the visitors and the suppliers to really provide more focused, dedicated, location-based products and services, right? And to enhance the experiences of the visitors, right? So I think, of course, technology is not going to go away. On the contrary, it's going to impact our businesses and daily life even more and more in the near future. We are already feeling that on a daily basis, right? But I think, there are a lot of research in this area trying to kind of, focus on testing certain models, right? Which sometimes can become very limited, right? So I think, we need to focus more on really the dual role of technology in terms of its affordance or capability. Yes, technology will enable us to do a lot of different things related to travel, right? Search for information, ordering products, engaging in social media, share our experiences, even after the trip, and so on and so forth, right? But also we need to focus on the concession aspect of the technology utilization, which means that, what kind of sacrifices we are ready to give up, in order to be able to adopt or use certain type of technology. Some of the issues, of course, are related to privacy-related issues, safety concerns, right, related to technology. So I think, more research should be focusing on not only the positive aspect of technology, but what are some of the potential dangers and the challenges when people adopt certain technologies, right? Last but not least, tourism experiences and emerging markets. Of course, experience is really a core concept we are dealing with in tourism, and that is also reflected in research, right? And then at the same time, when we talk about these emerging markets, both from the supply side aspect or from the demand side aspect, right? We have to really come up with different strategies and different models to look at this. So, for example, from a visitor's aspect, there are certain emerging markets, including China, India, and Saudi Arabia, Central Asia, and Africa to a certain extent, right? So these people are coming equipped with different kinds of cultural awareness or backgrounds, right? So we have to be really cognizant of that and try to be sensitive to their different sets of needs and preferences, right? And then from the supply aspect, how we can be better prepared to meet the needs of all these emerging markets, which I think is going to play major roles, right? So if you think about China as one example, before the COVID, right, they are sending out 150, 160 million international visitors worldwide, okay? That is only coming from one country, right? I believe that, as time goes by, right, when the COVID impact is erased, right, there will be a lot of travelers, coming from these emerging markets, China, India, typically those are two biggest markets, I can think of, right? So these are the general 5 areas we focus on. Of course, we submit a perspective paper to your journal. Hopefully, it will be published. And then if people are interested in more detailed information related to these 5 subject areas, of course, they can always go and read the paper itself.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Raymond. And we've just got a small number of slides just to emphasize a couple of points. I think Brian is just going to cover the next 2 or 3 on the sort of relationship between sustainability and resilience. And I think just as a prelude, I think if you look at what's happening in Valencia and Barcelona in the Balearic Islands at the moment with the terrible flooding, it's a classic example, really. Florida get bombarded with hurricanes and all sorts of stuff every year, but its resilience or its ability to manage crisis is very impressive. So although it's confronted every year with sort of mini disasters, the organization is incredibly strong, and that in itself puts the mind at ease of the visitor. So it helps people keep coming despite the fact that they know that these things happen. But on that note, Brian, are you there, sir?
I'm here, but I'm just wondering whether I'm worried about the amount of time we've got remaining. I was wondering if we actually ought to get
Okay,
forward to the end.
I think you're right. So what I'll do, I just
I can talk through the. Oh, do you want to talk about that?
yeah, I'll focus it, and then
Go
Brian,
for it.
I'll let Brian finish with the summary points, which thing, Brian, you're perfect for. And
Yeah, I can do that.
This is a recent study that I did with two colleagues here, and it really just emphasizes the point. There's a few points I think it emphasizes, and I'm really interested to see what Isaac says in terms of Canberra and Australia in a few minutes' time. But I think one of the driving forces for all work on destinations is they're very, very context specific. So what is true in Orlando here is actually very different to what happens in Tampa, which is about an hour and a half down the road. And it's very, very different to the context of Miami, 3.5 hours in the other direction. So you've always got this very context specific scenario. But the sort of sensitivity and the exposure and the adaptive capacity of destinations, I think this has been really, there's many, many really interesting papers in this space at the moment. And I go back to Florida, it's the destination's ability to organize and preempt these things, the sort of shocks and stresses that are out there, that really does feed into its competitiveness as a destination now. And so no matter what you throw at some destinations, they just cope. If you look at, the terrible situation in Spain at the moment, it just seems to go from bad to worse. So the organization and the mindset of people to be resilient is really, really important. Just a couple of points for me before I pass to Brian. The question you tasked us, Mariana, does research have a solution? And if so, will anybody listen? I'm the eternal optimist. I actually think it does. And it pains me sometimes when I'm reading the Trinet news of some of the doom and gloom. And I just give some examples. So myself and Raymond Yu Cheng here, we're funded by industry, so we're paid by industry. We have endowed chairs, so we're financially reliant on industry, and there's probably nowhere else in the world where a dean that Yu Cheng was at the time was the co-chair of the COVID committee, so to speak, to bring Orlando back. And you're dealing with a destination of 74 million visitors. So you've got an academic who is the co-chair of an organization to bring back a massive, massive destination. So I think sometimes it's on academics to be a little bit more creative in how they actually make impact. And I'm sure Isaac be aware this is Destinations International, which is the industry body in the United States. In many cases, their strategic priorities are not that different to what we're saying. So this is an organization that represents around 1,600 destinations across the US and internationally. And two things we do at the Rosen College is we're constantly getting out there, so we're connected in many ways. But actually, we republish our material, Mariana, in what we call plain English. So we make our academic research as accessible as possible through a printed magazine and it's digital. And what is interesting about this is funded by an industry donation. So we got a $100,000 donation to translate our academic work into plain English so people could actually understand. So I think academics, we can do a better job. There are things out there that we can do, but it's certainly the effort that we're putting in. And again, going back to Isaac, it intrigued that Isaac's a doctor, which I think is fantastic. We've got 3 PhD students who finished over the past 3 years who are employed by DMOs for their research expertise, their methodological expertise, and their slightly different understanding of tourism. So the US gets bashed sometimes, but actually there's some real positives behind the scenes. So on that note, Brian, we've just got 2 slides to conclude, Mariana, on what we believe are like 6 key points for the future of scholarship. And I'll pass to Brian.
Thanks, Alan. And very quickly, just to say thank you, Mariana, for having us. 3 wise men, you might call us, or 3 old hacks, depending on your point of view, but that's who we are. I just wanted
3 old wise men.
3 old wise men. Okay, we found it really difficult. We mentioned earlier that I can't remember if it was Alan or you, Cheng, said earlier that we had some robust discussions about what topics we ought to pick out, and I think that's really code for we had some big arguments. Robust discussion is just what we call it. It's actually a big argument, and the same with the kind of picking out where we think future scholarship needs to go in terms of destination marketing and management. And we ended up with 6 points, and I'll just briefly, if I may, just go through those with you, the audience. The first is that we certainly feel, as people who have been researching in this area for a number of years now, that the destination marketing and management can't, although we call it that, it can't stand on its own as just those disciplines, as just the marketing and management disciplines. And if it's really to be valuable and impactful, it needs to draw on research from the other disciplines, because destinations are not easily pigeonholed into any one academic area of study. So what we're saying is, what we'd like to see more in the future, much more than is currently the case, is interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approaches, I should say, to scholarship, so that we're bringing in economists and psychologists and geographers and anthropologists, because what we tend to find is that destination marketing and management is very much based on the marketing and management disciplines alone. And that leads us on to the second point, is that multidisciplinarity is one thing, interdisciplinarity is better. So what we need is a greater focus on interdisciplinary studies that don't just look at the subject from different disciplinary points of view, which is simply just multidisciplinary, but actually put them together and generate new ideas, new theories, new concepts, new ways of solving or attempting to solve problems that are actually interdisciplinary rather than simply multidisciplinary. And that, I think, has really got to be the future of destinations, because they are so complex. Any one discipline can't possibly hope to hold all the cards that we need to operationalize the responses we need to the multitudinous problems of destinations at the moment. And while I agree with Alan that we need to be more, we do need to be optimistic that this will happen, I think there are some steps that need to be put into place in order to reach that brighter future. And definitely one of those for me is to be more interdisciplinary. But for some reason, as academics, and this is a question we might all like to ask ourselves, is why don't we? Why don't we embrace people from other disciplines? I often hear people say, I'm really interdisciplinary because here's a services marketer and I'm an experiences marketer. And that makes us interdisciplinary. No, it doesn't. You're both still marketers, Look outside of that and see what you can do with people from other perspectives, because we need that range of perspectives. Thirdly, it's not just an academic thing. It's not just a business thing either. We need active input from the whole range of destination stakeholders, including tourists themselves. And I'm afraid we do tend to have, as academics, this kind of hero mentality that we'll go into a situation like the A-Team and we'll make an armored car out of some old pieces of truck that you find inside the barn, and you come out with all guns blazing, solving the problem and rescuing the people who are in trouble. And that's not really what we can do. What we need to do is to go in there and co-create our research with the people for whom the research is, for whom are stakeholders of the research. That includes tourists as well. I think there's a tendency for us to see tourists as our research subjects rather than as our research collaborators. And I think we need to move much more towards the latter of those. Thanks, Alan. He's already moved it on. I looked away and he's moved it on. It looks exactly the same to me. And oh no, it is the new slide. Okay. I know that a lot of people will say we haven't spoken at all. We haven't even mentioned the word over-tourism yet. And this is a big problem because we academics, you know, Alan and Yucheng and I haven't recognised over-tourism. We have, and we've recognised buzzwords like revenge tourism as well, but we haven't used those words. And one of the reasons I think we're loath to use those words, because they are just buzzwords. They are just words that the media are using at the moment to try and popularise a problem of an idea or a paradigm that's actually been there for a very long while, at least as long as this journal's been going, at least 30 years. I remember Edward Inskeep and reading his book with great interest about sustainability. And I would say that things like revenge tourism, over-tourism, and even to a large extent words like resilience and adaptive capacity are really expressions of sustainability, as is inclusivity, as is responsibility. And I think there's a danger that we get fixated on these new terms. And in effect, all we do is we just reinvent the wheel. We just create the same ideas, but with new words. And I think we should really try and avoid that. Penultimately, that's a good word, isn't it? Penultimately, last but one, the complexity of destinations continues apace. The thing about technology, which Yucheng has talked about social, political, the global village we now live in, the complexity, the interconnectedness of the environmental challenges we face, all of those make the domain of destinations really quite messy. So we have got to recognize that we need complex solutions and complex ways of addressing this increasingly complex problem. So we're going to have to, as academics, be more sophisticated and complex in what we do to keep up with the complexity of the problem domain. And finally, I think that, as Yucheng was saying, talking about governance, and I'm just moving this on just one step, at the moment we've got DMOs that are still, many of them largely concerned with marketing, and they're largely based in government, although some are PPPs and some are private organizations like some of the visitor bureaus in the United States. But largely speaking, they all serve the same tasks they all address the same tasks. And actually what we need, I think, is leadership in the destination area, much more leadership. At the moment, I think we've got lots of potential leaders out there, and DMOs are one of those potential leaders. I think it's time for DMOs to stand up and step up and say, right, we're going to not just be here to support the destination, but to lead the destination. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you, everybody. I think there's one more slide, isn't there, Alan? Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Brian. And apologies, we did go over slightly, Mariana, but we're academics, so you probably half expected that. So
that's
I'll
okay.
I'll stop sharing. Hopefully that was beneficial.
Very much. Thank you all, the three of you. I think you gave us a lot of food for thought, many key areas and aspects to cover. So I really appreciate, and that's okay with the time. Shall I open the floor for questions to anyone who is attending us live here today?
We like questions.
That's your chance to challenge or to ask any clarification that anyone would like to. If I may, just to break the ice and probably allow some time for people to reflect, you started by mentioning this big difference or a difference between how DMOs operate in US and in other parts of the world. But what I see gradually, and Isaac will also probably have some more things to confirm later on, as time goes by, I think this business model or operational model of DMOs in US being diffused in other parts of the world. Can I claim that? And what is your view or why this is happening, you think?
Is that a question for Isaac?
Is that a question to everybody or?
Yeah, whoever wants to take the lead.
Yeah. Maybe I can give it a shot. I think, really depending on the stakeholders you're talking about or stakeholders you're referring to, right? So as far as North America is concerned, as far as the visitors are concerned, right? The simple question we can ask ourselves is that, how many times as visitors before our trip, we're going to go to the DMO's website and find out information and book products and so on and so forth, right? And most of the people will not do that, They will simply go to the third-party search engine or whatever information platform, okay, and leading them to the bigger platforms. If you need to book hotels, you go to the big platforms, right? Booking.com, let's say, right? If you need to purchase airline tickets, you go to Expedia and Travelocity and some other platforms, right? If you need, for example, destination-specific services, right, you will go to the individual businesses, right? So the DMO model or the business model is not that very much relevant to the
Raymond, you're muted.
Yes, sorry, that was my mistake.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now it's
okay.
Yeah.
I don't know where I stopped, but what I'm saying is that the DMO as a business model probably is not that much important or relevant to the visitors, individually, right? But when you talk about the community-wide, destination-wide events, conventions, and meetings, right, and some other sports events, right, in that role, DMO actually is can play a very, very important role in coordinating all the resources, right, and then leading efforts, so to speak. Both Alan and Brian mentioned about the leadership role of DMOs, right? So I think we're not just throwing the baby with the water altogether, saying that okay, the business model of DMO is kind of diffusing in North America or Australia or in other parts of the world, right? So it still plays a very, very important role. It still provides a lot of value, right? But we need to kind of, delineate that value in terms of the stakeholders we're trying to serve. I think that will be my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Would anyone of the rest would like to add something or?
Look, I think, hi everyone. First of all, thank you. That was really interesting, and it's amazing that despite so many discussions about the relevancy of DMOs, like 10 years ago, people were asking, will we still have DMOs in 10 years, and will they still be around? And yes, they are around. We're still here, still very relevant, and research is done, and it's all happening. But to your question, Mariana, I think it's a bit hard to generalize when it comes to DMOs because there's so many types, sizes, budgets to DMOs worldwide. And, when you look at Dubai tourism, right, they are so different than many other DMOs that I know in terms of their scope of work. They do so much, not just in marketing, but development and resilience and sustainability. They're everywhere. They're basically building the place from scratch, based on my understanding anyway. While some other DMOs just focus on increasing awareness, etc. So it's a hard one to answer, but yeah.
Yes, you're very right. There are many different countries, political, economic situations that they make the picture more like a puzzle. Yeah, brilliant. Yep. So since you made that lead, Isaac,
I'll jump in.
Yes, I will come back to you. So let's introduce to everyone Isaac Miraki. It's not by coincidence that I invited you to join us in the panel, Isaac. I know you have traveled around, you have lived and worked in many different countries, particularly in the DMO field. So I'm really eager to hear your views in terms of two key questions that I have here for you, from you. what DMOs are doing in terms of roles and functions. Have you seen that these have changed in relation to time or in relation to the countries you have experience with? And if there are similarities or differences, why this is happening? What are the factors driving that? So thank you for
Perfect.
joining us. Isaac is currently in Canberra, Australia, Senior Director of Marketing for the DMO there. So welcome and thank you for your
Thank you.
insights.
Thanks, Mariana, and thanks for having me today. I'm going to talk a bit about new dynamics versus old habits of DMOs. And it's interesting, in Australia, they're not called DMOs, but rather STOs, State Tourism Offices, which I personally think is probably a better name because marketing, again, isn't the focus. It's part of the mix. And there are many other duties and responsibilities that I'm going to quickly cover. I'm sure some of them will be familiar, potentially some are going to be new. Let's give it a go. Next slide, please, Mariana, is focused around what has changed. What I have for the first point that I feel is a big change, at least for us in Canberra, but also some other Australian STOs, is that we start to explore the lower parts of the marketing funnel. As you are familiar, marketing funnel starts with awareness, then consideration, that ends with conversion, which is the actual sale. While DMOs don't sell rooms or air tickets, they tap into collaboration with those who do so. So we are having, for example, a marketing collaboration with Expedia and with Skyscanner, who actually sell those products. And we bring in the content element, the conversion space, much more front and center in the work of many DMOs that I'm familiar with. So that's a change. The next one is more collaborations with major online travel agents. For a while, DMOs and OTAs weren't best friends for reasons I'm not sure of, but the good thing is that now we see more DMOs are taking a step back from tech and product development and instead see OTAs as the tech enablers and get closer to them to develop new products on a global level. I'm sure you remember there were periods where DMOs were obsessed with creating products like trip planners. But when you think about it, it took them so long and it was so expensive. It basically ate entire DMO budgets, only to come up with a product that was mediocre at best. It's good to see, and I'm really happy to see that DMOs have become a little bit more, let's say, modest with their understanding of what they can do and what they cannot do well enough. And so technology and technology development is probably not one of these things. They're excellent in many other elements of the business. Technology can be done better by online travel agents like Booking, Expedia, Agoda, and so on. And so these collaborations are really important, and we see more of them lately, especially in Asia, by the way. Community involvement, we bring city locals into everything we do. That wasn't a big thing in the past. For us in Canberra, a stronger focus. We include locals in our campaigns. We include locals in our brainstorming sessions around product development, policy development. We've just launched a new tourism story for the city, which is basically the DNA of tourism in Canberra. And locals are taking a big part of the tourism story. So community involvement, very important for DMOs. The next one, I think, makes total sense and is very clear to everyone. Sustainability leadership is becoming more important. In Canberra, we're trying to be the connector between industry and sustainability certification agencies. For example, we're working with Ecotourism Australia. We've invited industry to join Ecotourism Australia to go through a certification process. We had 20 spots to offer to industry. So far, only 10 were taken up by industry. And so the low uptake indicates that there's still a gap in explaining why sustainability is important in the tourism space. And this is another role for us, another responsibility to educate our industry about that topic. Last but not least, diversification of markets and segments, I think, is also very important for us. We see that the competition in the DMO landscape, in the destination landscape, is fierce. And so we can't just afford focusing on one or two markets, but rather have more markets that we cater for. In Canberra, 3 years ago, we only catered to Australia, especially New South Wales, Victoria, and just a little bit internationally. Singapore was on our radar. 3 years on, we have marketing presence and trade presence in India, in West Coast US, Singapore, and the UK. So that's a big change for us, and I'm sure for many other DMOs as well. Now let's jump to the next slide, please, which talks a bit about what remained the same. And first and foremost, it's creating awareness. We're here to tell people that a place like Canberra actually exists, and it's a great city to visit. I think DMOs, STOs still play a big role in that space, especially when it comes to places with low awareness levels like Canberra. Probably less so for popular destinations, and I agree with some of the comments that were made here about US destinations that can live very well without a DMO. For a city like Canberra, it's going to be very hard. Our contribution is seen immediately. We have a research agency that follows everything that we do and provides input into intent to visit and shift in perceptions. And all of these metrics are significantly affected by our work. And so this is still a strong focus for us. The next one is increasing consideration through trade engagement. This is still a big thing for DMOs. I think it speaks for itself. Policy development and industry support. Again, an easy one. In Canberra, we have a thing called a program called Major Event Fund, where we support big events, musicals, shows, exhibitions. We'll bring them to town. Just recently, just one tiny example, we invested $70,000 in bringing Chicago the musical to Canberra. And we got really good ROI of close to $3 million in economic development value to the city. That is hotel stays, restaurant expenditures, shopping, and so on and so forth. So that still is on. The last point is a bit disappointing for me to share, but I still see very much a disconnect between DMOs and travel tech startups. I actually wrote a paper about that topic a few years back. There's a gap between DMOs and travel tech startups, though both share very similar goals around enhancing visitor experiences. They operate in a separate bubble, and it's not just DMOs, it's also the traditional industry, hoteliers, etc. And then the other bubble is those techies that have never worked in tourism but came up with a beautiful startup. I think better connectivity between the two would lead to better products for tourists, visitors to enjoy, for destinations to embed, and those entrepreneurs would be getting better test for their products. I'm talking mainly about early stage startups, not advanced companies, of course, but that's an interesting one to mention. The last one, Mariana, is the last slide, please, is about those factors that driving some of the changes I presented. Decreasing DMO budgets make them do more with richer OTAs. It makes total sense. If I can't afford building up a trip planner, but Agoda is working on one, then I will collaborate with them, add some value, insights, needs, and I'll enjoy the end product and share it globally, which is fine. That's just one example. Slow recovery in some destinations and pressure from industry require DMOs to play in the conversion space. We feel it every day. It's an expectation from the industry that we're here not just to talk about a place, but also to sell it, and we're doing it more. Of course, under the limitations that we have as a government entity. We're not a private sector business, and that's important to note as well. The last point, audience demand for more sustainable products, is on the rise. We know that more visitors want to stay in sustainable hotels, want to visit destinations that have a proper sustainability policy. It's only growing. It's here to stay. And so another important reason for these changes. That was it from me very quickly, but I hope it was useful. I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Isaac. Um, any questions, first of all, from the floor?
It's just a comment, actually. I enjoyed that, so thank you. I think the challenge with the travel tech industry is exactly what you say. They've got great ideas, they have great energy, and they just sort of bounce into the industry and totally disrupt. And it's true of so many industries now. But I think
Yeah.
one good example, I'm not particularly close to it, but I know colleagues in Australia, the Travelist organization, which is based in London,
Yes.
but a lot of the main OTAs are connected in some shape or form. So although
Yeah.
it's got a very niche sort of data-driven remit, I think it does show occasionally you can actually get these people together, and slowly and surely they will converge in some manner. But yeah, the energy, and particularly in the United States, as you can imagine, there's new ideas popping up every Tuesday, which is a challenge for the conventional destination, I guess.
If I may jump up into that, I have seen many countries, including Greece, having incubation programs and mentorship programs to help the startups to grow and flourish. I have the privilege to be a mentor of such a startup program. It's called Capsule T. It is funded by the Chamber of Hoteliers in Greece, supported by Marketing Greece. And what Isaac said before, I see it in real life. Many of these startups that I actually mentor as well, they have no relation with tourism. It's just programmers or there are other people from different fields that they come up with this brilliant idea. They can develop the software, but then they have no idea how to promote it in the tourism industry, how to grow it, how to generate money. And they really need support. They need the tourism industry to embrace them. They need the tourism industry in some way to guide them. Yeah. And such programs, I think they're really, really very important because it's a win-win situation for our field. Yeah, to get fresh ideas and empowerment from these kind of sectors. Here in Newcastle, again, there is not a DMO kind of an organization supporting that's a scheme, but we as a university, we have an innovation unit, department, which gives mentorship and guidance to startup companies, not in tourism per se or limited. We do this for any startup company. And I have to admit, because I have been involved in that as well, many of these startups, they do relate with tourism. And it's quite nice to see that. So yeah, I fully agree with that. There is a missed opportunity in some way if we don't do anything about them to give the fresh ideas and blood in our sector from that perspective.
And maybe academia can help with that. Maybe academia can be the connector or the enabler between the DMOs and those startups, as in the example you've just shared, Mariana.
We really want to initiate an innovation lab as well. Hopefully that will be part of our international hotel school project, but I can't say more things at this stage, but yeah, we have this in mind.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Can I just add
So
maybe one more?
You've queued me up nicely for a little bit of blatant self-promotion, but it's totally relevant. So we developed about 3 or 4 years ago, we have a master's in travel technology and analytics, which is a collaboration between our college and the College of Engineering and Computer Science. And it all came about through an informal conversation with Expedia, who were bemoaning the fact that they could recruit the computer engineers really, really easily. They could recruit students who understand tourism really easily. But what they couldn't find was the tech geniuses who actually understood the industry. And their sort of strapline was everybody thinks tourism is really easy. And of course, once you dive into it, it's not. So that was its background. And the catch is you have to be a STEM student. So you have to come in as a STEM student, and because a lot of it's programming, but they do a lot of our courses as well to understand the interplay and the interactions in the industry.
Yeah.
But,
and that gives another example of what you were claiming before, that we need to become more multidisciplinary in whatever we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Just add on what Alan just mentioned. That was just one of the specific examples. As a college, actually, at least in the last 5 or 6 years, we adopt this model, which we call the hospitality plus model. Okay, so basically, we are saying that let's not look at hospitality and tourism just as an industry sector. Let's treat it as a culture, and then it has value for everybody, right? So if it has value for everybody, that will really provide some great collaborative opportunities between us and all these other industry sectors, right? So I think we are very successful in relation to that. Really, just give you one example, another example in terms of the research, right? And before we utilize the model, and then we wrote proposals and submitted proposals to industry professionals within our hospitality and tourism industry, right? And for funded research, right? So every year we got about $500,000 as a college, okay, which is very, very good, right? But right now we completely open our door to other industry sectors. We are working with the healthcare system, hospitals, right? Bring hospitality to healthcare. We are working with the technology companies, engineering, computer science, sides of the business, and create opportunities over there, right? So right now, our faculty members are working on funded research projects, probably close to $10 million, okay? So that is kind of, impact and opportunity, we can see by creating a more collaborative relationship with other industries, because as Isaac mentioned, the disconnection between the DMO and a technology company. Yes, I agree. DMOs will never become a technology developer, right? So, DMOs are focused on the applications of technology. Whatever technology is made available by the developer, right, by the big players, and then we try to take advantage of that and then try to utilize those technology in a context of tourism, right? But if we create a collaborative, relationship and say, hey, these are our needs, okay? And this is how complex the tourism industry is, right? And then what kind of technology platforms you can develop for us to really fit the needs of our industry and then solve the complex, demand from the visitors, right? So I think, that aspect still needs to be encouraged a lot.
If I may interrupt, because Isaac will have to leave very soon. Isaac, if you have 1 minute, I was very interesting to see that you said you increasingly involve the city locals, and you use this terminology instead of residents, and I love that. Because you might be involved and operate in the region, but you might not be a resident, you might be just working there. So you do involve them.
Exactly, especially in a city like Canberra, where so many people move here just for work, public sector, and leave after 2-3 years. So why not including them in our work? They're amazing.
My question, we hear a lot in terms of the need of DMOs to assess their performance, not only in terms of financial measures, but also soft measures like quality of life and well-being, particularly for the city locals. To what extent have you introduced that? Or
It's a
what are
good
you
question.
doing in that space?
That's spot on, Mariana. Actually, Visit Canberra is part of the economic development unit at the ACT government. And so everything that we do is measured according to economic development metrics, including do residents of Canberra enjoy the benefits, the fruits of the visitor economy, whether or not they have a tourism related business. Do they enjoy the events that we bring to town? Because we don't do that just for visitors. Residents can enjoy them as well. Do they have any complaints or questions or concerns about some of the events that we organize as part of our visitor economy efforts? We run surveys, we ensure that people are aware if something is about to happen. We make them involved in planning some of the events. And so we don't focus just on tourists or visitors per se. The city is very much a big part of the decision-making, planning, and feedback mechanism.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I know you need to go, and
I do.
I appreciate your
No problem.
vision.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Isaac.
Nice to meet you all. Bye. Bye-bye.
But this gives me the opportunity to invite Peter to share his thoughts. Peter, welcome to our panel, and thank you so much for your commitment and time to share your knowledge with us. Peter,
you're welcome.
is a destination management consultant for Toposophy. I have to admit, I have been following Toposophy for years, and I'm really impressed of what you're really doing. It's really good input and good contribution to our industry that everybody loves. So I don't want to consume more time. I will urge people to visit the website of Toposophy. There are valuable resources and examples that you can see. But I will give the floor to Peter.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just share a few slides with you, if that's okay. And
yes, please.
Someone just needs to let me share them. There we are. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okie dokie. Can you see them on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Brilliant. Well, hello everybody. Good evening. I'm originally from the UK, but I'm based in Amsterdam, where it's 11:15. And so forgive me if I'm a little bit slow because I've also only 24 hours ago arrived from China, so I have a little bit of jet lag, but that's all good. I'd just like to share with you a few reflections, and I just obviously have caught the tail end of the conversation there with Isaac, a good friend of mine, and I'm aware that there's going to be some overlap and hopefully some synergy with what he was discussing there. And I suppose my other disclaimer is that I don't have an academic background in this area, but I've been working in tourism now for about 20 years, in consulting for about 11 years. And I just wanted to share with you probably just some reflections of, let's say, the realities of working with DMOs in the times we find ourselves in. And also very quickly, just before I get into that, wanted to commend the authors of the discussion paper, which I was reviewing before this. And I think they've done a very good job of trying to navigate and bring together the very complex space that DMOs find themselves in today. There's many volumes that could be written about this subject, but I hope that I can help as well. Just as a quick, I won't dwell on this. With information is all on our website about exactly who we are, but we're a placemaking and marketing agency working extensively. We've worked in many countries, particularly in Europe. And we don't just do strategy and research work. We also have marketing and events and other aspects of our work that we work on with destinations. We've also got a series of partnerships, and through these, this is where we've been developing a lot of our thought leadership work over the years, particularly with City Destinations Alliance. It's an alliance of 120 major and capital cities in Europe, as well as City Nation Place as well. So I just thought I'd bring, it's not easy for a Brit to sit and talk on behalf of the whole of the continent of Europe, where there is so much variation and so many different, there's so much going on. But I suppose the one thing to just briefly share with you then is that I think that DMOs ultimately do find themselves in a precarious position. I'm sure this has been part of your conversations already, and I know it was definitely alluded to in the paper. So their search for a meaningful role is more urgent than ever before. And I suppose just before getting into explaining that further, I suppose I just wanted to share with you that, obviously DMOs, we are aware that they're far from being a very homogenous group. There's a huge variation then in the remits, the core functions, and the level of resourcing and their size as well of these organizations. We've been watching, we do quite a lot of work in the UK and Ireland. And within the UK in England, as many of you may know, this is as a result of Nick Dubois who I think is now the chairman of Visit Britain. He's been there's a sort of process underway in the UK of trying to bring some order to the chaos, or some uniformity to what is a very fragmented system of DMOs in different cities and regions of different shapes and sizes, with destination partnerships. There's a couple of pilots which have received funding, and of course there's local visitor economy partnerships, which is a sort of level down from that. It's basically about trying to form proper DMOs that make sense for a particular region or a collection of cities together. So it's something to watch. It's ongoing. It's not an easy process, but it's been very interesting to see how in Britain they've been trying to bring some uniformity to that system. So what do I mean when I say I think that DMOs are in a precarious position? Well, as we know, their traditional role as sort of of promoters, of curators, as arbiters, or the shop window for a certain place has been eroded as big platform. A lot of consumers on the whole tend to go towards the big platforms to find this sort of information. So I think it's hard to argue that the DMO is fully in charge in inverted commas. So that's something that they're grappling with, and that, of course, has shifted their rationale for them to be spending lots of money on promotion and marketing, and obviously focus more on the destination management issues. It tried to coordinate what is a very we all know this. The tourism sector is complex, and it's a very disparate and fragmented industry with a big mix of people who come along to consultations that I do typically in a city. You're dealing with people who represent the big platforms, online platforms, and then you're dealing with like a baker's shop or a small chain of cafes, and somehow you've got to make sense of this and put their perspectives on an equal footing. What you're trying to do. They're also, and you've just heard this from Isaac, widening their focus from a destination-only approach to that place-based approach. This is not happening everywhere all at the same speed, but it's certainly underway, especially in places like the UK, which I see as a bit of a canary in the coal mine. But this approach, in one way or another, is absolutely underway. But of course, trying to find that if you've got someone experienced like Isaac in charge, then you're lucky. But this is not something that is easily done, especially where you've got public organizations that are jostling for relevance, and people's jobs are at stake, all that sort of thing as well. And let's be honest, DMOs find themselves under greater scrutiny than ever before. Not something that people, the media, or even politicians really tended to pay much attention to, but they do now, because tourism is increasingly being questioned by local residents, politicians, and the media. So you can argue whether the treatment that they get is fair or unfair, particularly when it comes to the media equating over tourism from place to place, etc. But we know that there's that scrutiny, and also, of course, DMO leaders, especially in cities where there's a lot of tourism, are having to get out there in front of the public in a way and in front of politicians in a way that they never really had to in the past as well. And yet, in spite of all of those challenges, I suppose the reflection is that DMOs do still matter in one way and another. Because destinations, in one way or another, need an organization that understands tourism. Just look at when there have been particular crisis, or we look at, obviously, in those early days of the COVID pandemic, and the politicians were scrabbling to understand how many visitors were in a certain place, or what to do about them, or where they were coming from, or how to stop the flow of visitors inbound. It wasn't just the police and the border agencies that they were dealing with. They needed to be able to talk to people who actually understood the industry and how complex it is. We still need organizations that are able to act in the public interest, perhaps now more than ever before. And we do need an organization that's capable of forming a strategy and a vision around and also define the type of tourism that a destination wants. And interestingly, as we know from their work here in Amsterdam, also getting better at defining the type of tourism that a destination doesn't want as well. Now, that wasn't always something that DMOs were comfortable with doing, but now they're having to. So I also wanted to point out, and this is from a piece of work that we actually did during the pandemic for the City Destinations Alliance, or European Cities Marketing, as it was then. And we were saying, okay, but amid DMOs being questioned constantly about their role, what do they have? What can they offer? And it is true that they still have a degree of authority. They are staffed generally by people who have strong pride and local knowledge in the destination. There is some influence there, contacts with the local media, etc. They do have the official communications channels for tourism in inverted commas, and usually a good network and a book of contacts. So this is you can argue about how much of this still exists, and obviously this varies from place to place. But I think it's fair to argue that most DMOs are sort of still usually have these assets to one degree or another. I suppose finally, just to wrap up from my side, I just wanted to share a few sort of personal reflections on when you're doing consulting. We're working on, for example, a destination management plan or a strategy for a city or a region. And we've worked with cities just in the last few years, including Edinburgh, Dublin, Belfast, Cambridge as well. And Glasgow as well as another recent example. What does this typically involve, and what are some of those reflections from that? What are we really doing when we're working on a strategy of some kind? What we're having to do often from the very beginning is explore and explain how tourism meets those local social and economic goals. Well, you'd say, okay, well, that makes sense. Of course you are. But that's not always easy when some of those key strategic documents for a certain destination, for a certain city or region, often they barely even mention tourism at all because it's not even being given much thought by the people who are writing the economic development plan, or they might not know much about it, or it's just one of those background industries that's assumed that it just looks after itself. But we're often having to go that step further and really explain the relationship between tourism and the local economy. Very often we're having to also help a lot when it comes to those key terms, because obviously in the world of policy, words accessibility, connectivity, sustainability, they're thrown around a lot. They're often abused. They're stretched as very far as well. But when it comes to DMOs, they often find themselves asking, okay, but what is our job? Is it our job to fix all of the connectivity or the accessibility problems in a particular city? Or how does this relate then to the visitor and what we're required to do? So sometimes that understanding is not always there, and our job is to come in and reassure and help define much more clearly the role of a DMO when it comes to some of these areas. We're also required to be that neutral player. Tourism is contested, and of course, you've always got stakeholders that have competing interests. And our job is to come in and be that neutral player who's capable, who can listen to everyone and then help form a solid judgment on what should happen. But sometimes, and I have to be honest, sometimes we found ourselves in a situation where there hasn't been a lot of coordination between some local stakeholders, even the local business community, and they don't really even know each other much. And that's actually sometimes a more difficult situation to start from, because you've got to do some of that work of really you physically get people and get them to come to a meeting and get around a table and discuss. So we often assume that there's often big industry groups that are ready to go when you're working on a project like that, but it's not always the case. Our job also, and this is something which I humbly say that I think we do very well and we enjoy doing a lot, is about inspiring. When you've got local challenges, often people blame it on local politicians and local problems, but they don't realize that other destinations are having to deal with very similar challenges to their own. And there's some very inspiring work going on out there. So part of our job is to help inspire people and show that common challenges can be overcome. And this is how other places are doing it. And using that benchmarking is often a very useful tool in helping to sort of nudge people towards changing what they're doing. And then our work, interestingly, previously a job was just to come in and help work out how you attract more visitors to a certain place. Now it's increasingly coming about how to manage visitors that are coming and taking our foot off the gas a little bit when it comes to the promotion. But of course, not everyone around the table is going to believe that's necessary, or is often thinks that over-tourism is a myth. We encounter all kinds of opinions out there according to the stakeholder that you're dealing with. So our work has been around helping to sometimes reassure or change the mindset around tourism growth, and quite often helping destinations to give them the confidence that a new approach is necessary, and that they're the people to try and take that on. But not easy taking on some vested interests. And finally, helping DMOs to navigate that rocky road of social sustainability. We know that environmental sustainability receives a lot of attention. There's a lot of schemes, indexes, certificates, quality, all sorts of standardization schemes that are out there that people can do in the environmental field. But the social sustainability in tourism is still, I believe, very much in its sort of early days, and people are but in a difficult world out there. People are trying to grapple with quite what to do about this. Now, we didn't invent this. This is a situation that's been around for a long time, but you could argue that the situation has become more critical. And when you come to a project working with your DMO, they're often looking very early for guidance and reassurance on this. So just to wrap up, I'd just like to offer, you're most welcome. These are all free downloads that you can find from us, and I'm happy to share them, send them on to Mariana, who can share them with you. A couple of years ago, we worked on this. We basically asked, if we started from scratch, if we started from zero, what type of organization would we set up in order to address the needs of for example, a city? It was about setting out a sort of new agenda for the placemaking and marketing organization. And it was let's say, a DMO reimagined, but with a remit that goes much broader than tourism. Earlier this year, with City Destinations Alliance, we released this report, really answering the question, hopefully, of how DMOs can drive social and community well-being. Very specifically pitched at the level of competence and the areas that DMO can work on. We mapped out 8 areas where we believe that DMOs can help to make a difference. And finally, this report, which we worked on for the European Travel Commission, it's a checklist, a very practical checklist, and a report about lessons and impacts on crisis management on tourism, written for NTOs and DMOs, and that's available from the European Travel Commission website that you can see there. So I sort of blasted you with a bit of a barrage, I suppose, of thoughts just around where DMOs find themselves right now. I hope these reflections are useful for your work. Yeah, I'm happy to just take any other questions, or Mariana, I don't know if you've got any comments at this stage.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you so much, Peter. As I said before, I always admire you for all the work and the contribution that you do. A very quick question from me before I check if somebody wants to ask something. You've been in the field for quite a while, I know. Have you seen any change or shift in terms of the topics or the areas of help that DMOs request you to work on?
Yeah, I suppose that I know that the issue around that shift from management from marketing to management is certainly not a new one, but I would say that it's certainly accelerated in recent years, and I think it was the pandemic that partly did that. Often those simple steps of coordinating the industry and working out maybe how a destination needs to change direction with a set of new products, or they're reacting to a particular crisis or something like that. Not all these issues don't always require marketing. The marketing is often the comfort zone because it's often a little bit the easy part. But our job sometimes is to help reassure places or help them understand that the marketing can be left till later, but we need to focus on aspects of management. It's very much open for debate about whether even some of the most progressive DMOs have actually made that shift. They often change the name above the door, but it doesn't always mean that they've actually made the shift.
And whether they have the budget and the authority to really manage, because yes, they are not going to dig the ground to put connectivity and cables, or they're not going to do the recycling.
No, and then when it comes to that, they then have to still define where their remit ends and the local council, the local government's remit starts as well. But actually, I suppose another way of looking at that is often, unfortunately, I find that many local councils, I don't think this is just in the UK, but other places too, they think that by having a DMO or by having a tourist information or having some DMO of some kind, they think, right, that's tourism sorted. Someone is taking care of that. We don't have to worry too much because we've got an organization that's doing it. but they don't realize how much, of course, the visitor experience they're responsible for. Keeping the toilets open, having a car park and the toilet litter and all of those basics, which in the end are the things that come up all the time when you're doing consultations with small businesses and residents as well. So partly our job is to sometimes have to talk to people, if we can, a bit higher up the chain and help them realize that they're involved in this too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah, maybe I can talk a little bit about that, from a North American perspective. That's great information, Peter, you shared with us. I really appreciate that, and I hope that some of the books are available on Amazon, especially one of the books, Redefining Places or whatever success, because I'm really interested in, reading, what you have over there, right?
Certainly, I'll send them to Mariana, and Mariana can share them with you.
Okay, that would be great. That would be great. So appreciate that, right? So in responding to your question, Mariana, in terms of the changing interests of the DMOs in relation to research, right? And then, from a North American perspective, it's also shifting very rapidly in the last, I think, maybe 15 years, right? One fact I have to point out is that, nearly every DMO, big and small, right? Some of the small ones, like here, CVB, Convention and Visitors Bureau, right? And everybody's working with an ad agency, all right? Everybody has an ad agency. That's a reflection of, what they think it is important to them, right? Because ad agency pretty much is focusing on promotion aspect of the business, marketing aspect of the businesses, right? And then the second major focus of interest from the DMO's perspective is really the economic impact. Okay, so that I can tell from our experiences. And if you submit, let's say, 2 proposals, right? One is focused on the impact of the tourism business to the local economy, right? And the other one is really focusing on the experiences of visitors, right? Other people tend to think that, of course, the experience is the most important aspect of the tourism businesses, right? And including the DMO businesses, right? But I guess, if you presented 2 proposals in front of the DMOs and then guess which one is going to pick in terms of funding the research project, it's always the impact study, right? To a certain extent, which makes you feel that, maybe experience is not important anymore to the tourism business, to the DMO businesses, right? So that's kind of a really interesting kind of, shift, right? So I think, it is nothing about, right or wrong, right? Positive or negative, right? But I think, we are kind of, trapped into this kind of pigeonhole, right? And of course, economic impact study that is, required for or demanded for a particular reason, right? And a more kind of, political related, because, they have to justify their existence and then, to showcase to the society, to the community, and to the other stakeholders, how important the business is, right? But, while we are doing that, we are actually losing the big picture. The big picture is really to provide the best memorable experiences to the visitors, right? So I just want to make a quick comment from North America.
DMOs are always on the question mark. So yeah, they need to justify the numbers and everything. I'm aware of time. So I will make a last question and I will ask you to be very brief, 50 words each. We have many people that they will be watching us, and they're watching us now, that they come from academia or research. So in 50 words, if you want to summarize, what are the major topics that from a destination marketing and management perspective, somebody should be watching in the future? Or what are the skills? Because we have many people that they want to work in this area. What are the skills and the competencies that somebody would need to have and build to get a job in a DMO or in a destination marketing position or management position? What are these? Ryan, I will, sorry?
Yeah, can I dive in? Because I just to start the response.
I'm counting.
And I just want to thank Peter, because I really enjoyed listening to what you had to say, Peter. And it's actually very encouraging from your side. It wasn't that different to our side, so it's really nice when you got people from very different backgrounds. We sort of fuse in the middle a bit, and I think the biggest challenge, and I'm really interested in what Peter says, it's finding the right people to take the roles of these leaders in the future, because they're really quite complicated roles and quite difficult roles because you're doing so many different things. You're connecting so many different parts, and you're part politician, you're part marketer, you're part planner, you're part entrepreneur. It's a really, really, really hard role. And I think it's a role that people really don't understand how complex and how difficult it is. I don't know if Peter's got a comment on that.
No, I think the only thing I can add is people skills, and particularly having to convince. But I mean, I remember it was 2017. I think it was. I went to a destination in Spain. I was there partly working on the release of their strategy, but it was the first time I'd ever seen a DMO leader have to get out in front of the public and really account to people who were sometimes slightly irritated about tourism in a particular city. And I thought, okay, this is interesting coming down the line. So basically, someone who's able to really very deftly account and very nimbly account for the role of their organization in front of a very big variety of different stakeholders. It used to be just the businesses and and maybe the mayor or the politician, but that's really changed now. I would say that's the skill, I would say.
And that's what was my experience last night when I went to the briefing of the Tourism Australia. We had all these top leaders on the stage, a floor full of industry professionals, 300 plus, and I could see the stress of these people on the stage trying to, I wouldn't say justify, but to explain what they're doing for the industry, for them, and how brilliant their team is, and they thank the industry for everything. And
I would add that I would add that both the soft skills and hard skills are kind of important in the DMO business, right? So the soft skill aspect, as Peter and Alan, alluded, the communication skill, people skills, those are the key, right? I mean, you can be a genius, right? And if you don't know how to communicate your vision, right, to the right type of stakeholders, and then, the whole thing will not work, right? So I think, that aspect is important, right? But also the competency, all right? So we have been doing a lot of work, with DMOs, big and small, in terms of creating collaborative opportunities within a destination. So Alan and Brian and, three of us actually worked on those areas, right? So what we find out is that, at a destination level, okay, whether the businesses are taking a more competitive approach or more collaborative approach is actually influenced by the competency and the trustworthiness of the DMO, okay? So the DMO leaders, for example, in front of the business group, right? And then they don't know what they're talking about. They don't have the competency. And of course, the business will not trust them, and forget about, working on these collaborative projects, marketing projects, promotional projects, and so on and so forth, right? So I think, both aspects are important, to remain nameless. One of some of the DMOs I work with, of course, it's influenced by the governance structure and, human resource allocation, strategies, right? So a lot of times the tourism office or the DMO is serving as a springboard for retirement. Okay. So, somebody worked, for other businesses, government agencies, right? And before your retirement, okay, we'll find you a place, you can go over there, just enjoy and, easily transition into retirement. When you go and talk to those people, they have no clue about what tourism industry is about, right? So, you have those, really unfortunate situations, right? So I think, the soft aspect, hard aspect, equally important.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Brian. 50 words, and we will close with you.
Yu Cheng had more than 50 words.
Well,
sorry,
I
apologize, right? Yeah, there's a fine I have to pay. How much? Just send me the check and I will pay. Invoice, I will pay.
Don't worry, you'll get the check. Brian.
I get several checks. Thank you, Mariana. I think that anybody working for a DMO these days, more so than ever, really needs to be a jack of all trades. And, destinations are so complex. There's so many different working parts with them. To give you a couple of examples, ones we've spoken about this evening, sustainability. I personally hate the term social sustainability. I hate it because what it suggests is that you can divide up sustainability into 3 or more components and deal with them separately. And that's not what sustainability is about. Sustainability has to stand on three pillars of the economic, the natural environment, and the socio-cultural side of things. And often you can end up trading off one against the other without realizing it. You're trying to work to improve your social sustainability, and what you're doing is you're denigrating your economic sustainability or your environmental sustainability, and you really need all three at the same time. And that is a particular skill set that very few people have, is to be able to work in all three of those worlds at the same time. And the other one is something Peter spoke about, which was about growth, and this growth. Some people call it a growth fetish, and I suppose, to be a bit provocative, I think we need people who can understand that growth, it doesn't have to just be about numbers, volume. Growth can be about value. It can be about quality. It can be about some of the other indicators that we may have for destinations. And simply looking at volume of visitors is something that I have seen in recent times. So I was at a major UK city a couple of years ago, and they were talking about recovery from COVID, and they were talking. This is the DMO talking, the city destination organization, talking about making back the numbers of tourists again. I think that's a big mistake. We need to be looking at the value of tourism, and we need to be defining that broadly. And that again takes quite a broad skill set. Speaking in only 50 words is a further skill set that everybody needs. I have failed miserably at that.
No, don't worry, but well spotted. Very two key important issues, I think, and something that it's not easy to solve. Yeah, but we need to be 360-degree views in terms of what we are trying to do, and not avoid trying being monolithic or myopic. Not easy task. And yes, we need to think outside our box in terms of metrics and how we define success or growth or development or whatever keyword somebody selects. So thank you, Brian. Thank you, Alan, Yutseng, Peter,
Pleasure.
Isaac, everyone. I really appreciate. Looking forward to your paper.
It's coming.
It's coming, yes. And there will be many more papers actually for different fields that the journal is compiling. We will share the news, we will share the videos. So stay in touch. Thank you once again. And
thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to
Thank
see
you very
everybody.
much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.